This is a journey through one of the most disturbing cases in Ozarks history. Before we start, please leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time you're listening to this narration. We want to know where and when these written accounts go and what times of day or night they happen. There are many secrets hidden under the old canopy of the Ozark Hills. The story of the Holloway family may be the one that has been most carefully erased from official records. What happened in the remote hills of southwestern Missouri in the winter of 1860 would be systematically removed from county records, newspaper archives, and public memory, but some stories refuse to stay buried. In December 1860, just before the Civil War broke out, a local hunter named Thomas Blackwell found the Holloway homestead, which had been abandoned. It was in a secluded valley about 20 miles southwest of Springfield. What he found there would stay with him for the rest of his life. Blackwell told the Greene County Sheriff in a sworn statement that the property looked like the people who lived there had just disappeared while they were eating dinner. There were plates of half-eaten food on the table that were now moldy and rotten. There was nothing left of the candles. The rocking chair by the fire still swayed in the wind. But the quiet was what scared him the most. Blackwell later told a reporter from the Missouri Intelligencer, "There were no birds singing near that place. Nothing moved in the underbrush. It was as if nature itself had turned its back on what happened there." Isaiah, his wife Martha, and Isaiah's older brother Jeremiah moved to the Ozarks in 1853 after traveling west from Virginia. Neighbors said they were very wealthy for people living on the frontier. They bought 320 acres of land with a lot of trees on it and built a big two-story house far away from the nearest settlement. They kept to themselves, Abigail Turner said. Her husband's farm was the closest to the Holloway property, but it was still an hour's ride away. Mr. Isaiah would come to town once a month to get supplies. He was always polite, but never talked to anyone. The wife was never seen. The brother Jeremiah came even less often. People didn't like the way his eyes looked. Isaiah Holloway's property deed and taxes were filed on time every year according to county records. There were no debts, no problems with neighbors, and no obvious reason to worry, but the family vanished without a trace. What happened next was probably even worse than the disappearance itself. County Sheriff Malcolm Harding put together a search party to look into Blackwell's report just a few days later. That December morning, 7 men rode out to the Holloway property, but only 5 came back. According to what people who were there say, Deputies James Collins and Frederick Weber left the group to look for something in an old tobacco barn on the north end of the property. When they didn't come back to the party by nightfall, the others looked for them but couldn't find them. They planned a second, bigger trip. This time, 30 armed men searched the property and the woods around it for 3 days. They couldn't find any signs of the Holloways or the missing deputies. Sheriff Harding wrote in his official report, which is now only a footnote in private papers given to the Missouri Historical Society in 1928, "It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole. We looked everywhere on that property, the house, the outbuildings, the well, and the forest around it. We couldn't find anything that would explain what happened to the Holloways or my deputies." But this wasn't completely true. Wesley Pritchard, a member of the search party, wrote to his sister in Street Louis that they did find something that the official report left out on purpose. Pritchard wrote, "We found a door in the cellar under the house that had been hidden behind stacked firewood. It led to a narrow tunnel dug into the ground. The sheriff sent 3 men to check it out. They came back pale and refused to talk about what they had seen. That night, the sheriff had the tunnel sealed with stones from the property wall and made us all swear never to speak of it again. No one knows what those men saw in that tunnel." Pritchard's letter doesn't say anything else, and he died of pneumonia just a few weeks after writing it. But whatever it was, it made local officials act in a way they had never done before. In January 1861, Hiram Woodson, the Greene County judge, gave an unusual order. The Holloway property was going to be torn down. The house and all of its outbuildings were to be burned down to the ground. The land was to be declared unfit for living on, and all county records about the Holloway family were to be sealed or destroyed. Judge Woodson's order, which was found in pieces in a collection of papers during renovations of the old Springfield courthouse in 1954, said that the Holloways could not be mentioned in any public document or newspaper. This is very strange. The order says, "In the interest of public safety and moral well-being, that all matters pertaining to the former residents of the property herein designated shall be expunged from public record and public memory. Anyone who breaks this order will have to pay a fine or go to jail." This kind of extreme action raises very important questions. What could have happened that would make it necessary to go to such great lengths to get rid of all the evidence? What awful secret did the Holloway property keep? The documented trail goes cold here. The Holloway name disappears from all official records for almost 40 years. Their land stayed empty, a blackened scar in the wilderness that people stayed away from without knowing why. But not having proof doesn't mean that something isn't there. People still talked about the Holloways in whispers, in bits of memories passed down from one generation to the next, and in the gaps between official histories. Dr. Eleanor Caldwell, a folklorist at the newly opened Missouri State University, started gathering oral histories from older people living in the Ozarks in 1898. The university archives have a transcript of an interview with Martin Howren, who was 82 years old at the time and had been a junior deputy with the Greene County Sheriff's Office in 1860. "I was just a boy," Howren said. "I wasn't even 20 when it happened. Sheriff Harding kept me behind when they went to the Holloway place, saying someone needed to mind the office. But when they came back, I heard things that weren't meant for my ears." Howren says that in the weeks leading up to their disappearance, Isaiah Holloway had been coming to town more often and looking more and more upset each time. Samuel Wilson, the owner of the general store, said he was a different man. His clothes, which had once been clean, were now dirty and wrinkled. His hands shook so much that he could barely count his coins. When I asked about his family, he looked at me like he didn't understand the question. Isaiah is said to have looked for Dr. Thaddeus Montgomery, a local doctor, on his last visit to Springfield, just days before the family went missing. What happened between them is mostly a mystery, as Dr. Montgomery kept his professional secrets even decades later. Montgomery did, however, make a vague reference to the event in a private letter to a medical colleague in St. Louis in 1878. He wrote, "In all my years of medical practice, I have never seen a case that bothered me as much as H. His symptoms were impossible to diagnose, but it was not the physical signs that bothered me. It was the absolute conviction with which he spoke of his brother's transformation. I told him to seek spiritual counsel, as the affliction seemed beyond medical help." Dr. Caldwell's oral histories from almost 40 years later show that this reference to Jeremiah Holloway's change still has some meaning. Sarah Jenkins told a disturbing family story about her grandmother, who was one of the few people ever welcomed into the Holloway home. Jenkins says that her grandmother was asked to come to the Holloway house in the fall of 1859 to help Martha Holloway keep the harvest safe. Grandmother only talked about it once, when she was older, Jenkins told Dr. Caldwell. She said the house was grand, but it felt wrong in some way. The proportions were off, and the shadows were too deep. Martha was nice, but she moved like a woman under stress. And then there was the brother, Jeremiah. Grandmother said he stayed upstairs the whole time she was there, but she could hear him moving around. Not like a man walks, she said. More like something heavy being dragged across the floor, back and forth, back and forth. When she asked about him, both Isaiah and Martha changed the subject. Jenkins went on. Grandmother saw something at an upstairs window as she was leaving. She thought it was a face, but it looked strange. She said it watched her with eyes that seemed to shine like an animal's in the dark. That night, she dreamed that she was being chased through a house that was bigger on the inside than the outside. This story, which is based on personal experience and has been told and retold over the years, is strangely supported by a document found in 1964 during the demolition of an old apothecary in Springfield. A small leather-bound book that looked like Jeremiah Holloway's personal journal was hidden in the wall. The journal, which is now in a private collection and not often available to researchers, is said to have entries from 1851 to 1860. The earlier entries are boring: business deals, weather reports, and a few personal thoughts. But starting in late 1858, the entries get more and more confused and disturbing. Some scholars who have looked at the journal say that Jeremiah started writing about the changes. He said that when he woke up at night, his limbs had grown longer. He wrote about a hunger that nothing could fill. He wrote down complicated calculations and diagrams that no one has been able to figure out. Jeremiah wrote in his last entry, dated the 12th of November 1860, just weeks before the family went missing. Isaiah knows. I can see it in his eyes. When he brings the food, he fears what I am becoming. Martha weeps beyond the door, but they do not understand. This is not a sickness, but an elevation. The hunger is a gift. Through it, I can hear the whispers of the old ones who lived in these hills long before us. Soon, I will be ready to meet them beneath. What should we think of these crazy things? Was Jeremiah Holloway's mental health getting worse? Or did he have a physical illness that affected his brain function? Or was something worse going on? The answer may be found in the strange history of the land where the Holloways built their home. The Missouri State Archives say that the 320-acre parcel was surveyed in 1831, but no one claimed it for more than 20 years, even though there was fertile land nearby. Folklore from the Ozark Cultural Heritage Center suggests that the Osage people, who were native to the area, stayed away from the valley because they thought it was a place where the boundary between worlds grew thin. Jean-Baptiste Robichaud, a French trapper who lived with the Osage in the 1820s, wrote in his journal about talking to an elder who called the valley Lulu Ulv Marsh, the place where dreams walk. The elder said that people who slept in the valley would find their dreams taking shape, and that some dreams, once given flesh, could never be returned to sleep. We don't know if the Holloways knew about these stories when they bought the land. It is known that the workers had some strange problems while building their house in 1853-1854. The Springfield Gazette reported on the 12th of May, 1854, that workers had to give up on the original foundation because they found what they called anomalous geological formations that made the ground unstable. A letter from the construction foreman, Silas Thornton, to his boss in Street Lewis, explaining why he left the project so suddenly, is even more telling. I regret to inform you that I can no longer continue supervision of the Holloway construction. The site presents challenges beyond my experience, and I find the atmosphere unconducive to sound work. The men complain of disturbed sleep and strange sounds from beneath the earth. Yesterday, 3 workers refused to enter the cellar, claiming they had seen something moving in the darkness. I myself have experienced nothing untoward, yet I cannot discount the effect on morale. I recommend you send a replacement who might approach the task with fresh perspective. Isaiah Holloway finally finished the house on his own, with only his brother's help. The community was surprised by this strange situation, but it was thought to be because the Holloways were private and thought to be strange. For the first few years after they got there, the family was only a small part of the community, but they were still there. Isaiah went to Springfield once a month to get supplies. Sometimes Jeremiah would join him. People didn't see Martha Holloway very often, but they knew she wrote letters to a number of women's charitable groups in Springfield and Street Lewis. One of the few direct glimpses into the family's life at this time is a letter from Martha to the Ladies' Aid Society of Springfield, dated April 1857 and kept in the Society's archives. Our home continues to take shape according to our vision, though the isolation sometimes weighs heavily. Isaiah assures me that once the improvements to the road are complete, we shall entertain more frequently. Jeremiah has become quite fascinated with the natural features of our property, particularly the unusual rock formations in the western woods. He spends many hours there, sketching and taking measurements. He speaks of writing a monograph on the geological peculiarities of the Ozarks, though whether anything will come of it, I cannot say. His enthusiasms tend to burn brightly, but briefly. This letter makes it seem like life is pretty normal. but a little lonely. But other evidence suggests that something strange was happening beneath this normal surface. In 1912, the Smithsonian Institution did an archaeological survey in the area where the Holloway property used to be and found something interesting. Researchers found a network of caves about a mile from the old homestead, under a rock overhang. These caves showed signs of both Native American occupation hundreds of years ago and more recent human activity. A pocket watch with the initials J.H. engraved on the case was one of the things found in the cave system. There was a picture inside that was badly damaged by water, but still looked like a family portrait. 3 people were standing stiffly in formal clothes: a man with a beard, a woman in a dress with a high collar, and a taller figure behind them whose face was blurry, either because the picture was damaged or because it moved during the exposure. Dr. William Parsons' archaeological report lists more findings that were not included in the published summary. The cave system extends far deeper than is typical for this region. The primary tunnel branches into numerous smaller passages, many of which show signs of recent enlargement by human hands. Tool marks on the walls indicate systematic excavation rather than exploratory digging. In the largest chamber, approximately 200 feet below the surface, we discovered what appears to be a deliberately constructed space. A roughly circular room with a level floor and walls that have been smoothed. In the center stands a stone table or altar, approximately 3 feet in height, bearing markings that do not correspond to any known Native American or European symbology. Most disturbing were the artifacts found surrounding the structure. Surgical instruments of European manufacture dating to the mid-19th century. Glass containers similar to those used by apothecaries of the period. And several journals containing notes and diagrams written in a cipher we have thus far been unable to decode. The presence of these items so deep within the earth, in a location that shows no evidence of habitation, raises profound questions about their purpose. The Smithsonian expedition wrote down what they found, but they didn't connect it to the Holloway family, who had been forgotten for a long time. In fact, by 1912, the story had been so well hidden that the researchers would have had no reason to make that connection. The artifacts were put away and labeled as items of unknown provenance, mid-19th century. For decades, no one said anything about them. The Holloway mystery didn't start to come together again until 1958, and it did so in the most surprising way. While digging up a hillside to build a new highway through the Ozarks, workers found human remains about 15 miles from the old Holloway property. At first, they thought they had found a Native American burial site, but forensic examination showed that the remains were those of 2 white men who died in the middle of the 19th century. Most notably, both skeletons showed signs of unusual post-mortem treatment. The medical examiner's report said that parts of the long bones looked like they had been cut with a sharp tool in a way that was consistent with removing tissue. Even more disturbing, both skulls showed signs of trepanning, which is when holes are carefully drilled through the bone. A small brass badge found among the remains might have kept these men's identities a secret. It was a Greene County deputy's badge, number 7, given to Frederick Weber in 1859, even though it was corroded. This discovery led historian Lawrence Mitchell to look into the case that had been forgotten for a long time. After years of hard work, during which he was constantly held back by missing records, sealed documents, and the deaths of anyone old enough to have direct knowledge, Mitchell published his findings in a 1963 book called The Holloway Incident: Institutional Erasure of Historical Trauma in the Ozarks. Mitchell's work, which was controversial and mostly ignored by historians at the time, did bring together the different parts of the Holloway mystery into a story that made sense, even if it wasn't complete. He said that the bones belonged to Collins and Weber, the missing deputies. He found pieces of the court order that had tried to erase the Holloways from history. Most importantly, he found and talked to Eliza Montgomery, who is 91 years old and the daughter of Dr. Thaddeus Montgomery. Mitchell's notes say that Eliza found a sealed envelope among her father's things that said it shouldn't be opened for 50 years after his death. There was a detailed account of Isaiah Holloway's last visit to her father's office inside. Dr. Montgomery wrote, "Isaiah Holloway came to me in a state of extreme agitation. His physical health was bad. He had lost a lot of weight, was pale,
and had tremors. But his mental health was worse. He said that his brother Jeremiah had changed in a way that went against natural law. Montgomery said that Isaiah told him that Jeremiah had become more and more reclusive in the months leading up to his death, refusing to leave his room on the upper floor of their home. He ate a lot of food, but he kept getting thinner. He said he heard voices calling to him from below the ground. Isaiah told his wife that he was starting to worry about her safety. Montgomery went on to say that Isaiah had found her sleepwalking toward Jeremiah's room one night. When he woke her up, she didn't remember getting out of bed. Another time, he found her in the basement digging at the floor with her bare hands, again with no memory of what she had done. Most disturbing of all, Isaiah said he had seen his brother on the property at night, moving in a way he called neither human nor animal, and appearing to be talking to something that wasn't there in the dark. Dr. Montgomery thought that Isaiah Holloway was suffering from a shared psychosis, which may have been made worse by the fact that they lived in a remote area. He told them to rest and suggested that they think about going back east to a more civilized place. Montgomery said, "I did not see Mr. Holloway again. When I heard about the family's disappearance, I told Sheriff Harding what I knew. I wasn't asked to join the search party, and I wasn't told what they found." Later, when Judge Woodson gave his extraordinary order to erase all records of the Holloway family, I knew that something had been found that was too disturbing for the public to know. I have followed that order until now, but as I near the end of my life, I feel the need to leave this account for future generations. Montgomery's story doesn't say why Isaiah Holloway didn't just leave the homestead with his wife, even though he was clearly upset about his brother's condition. What made them stay there, even though they were getting more scared and worried? Mitchell found a letter from Martha Holloway to her sister in Richmond, Virginia, dated October 1860, just weeks before the family went missing. This letter may hold the key to the answer. Dearest Carolyn, I write in haste and with trembling hand. I dare not commit to paper the full extent of our situation for fear that this letter might fall into the wrong hands, or worse, be intercepted by Jay before it leaves our property. Suffice to say that we are in circumstances of the utmost gravity. Isaiah speaks of returning east, but I fear it is too late for such a simple solution. Jay would not permit it, and his influence over Isaiah grows stronger by the day. They share a bond of blood that I cannot break. And there is the matter of what lies beneath, what Isaiah and Jay discovered last spring during their excavations. I have not seen it myself, but its effect on them both was profound. Isaiah speaks of it only in whispers, and always with a strange reverence that chills my blood. I have made preparations of my own, though I do not know if I shall have opportunity to implement them. In the drawer of my writing desk, I have left a full account of all that has transpired here since we first arrived. If you do not hear from me by Christmas, I implore you to contact the authorities in Springfield and direct them to that document. But caution them most severely about what they might find. Your devoted sister, Martha. Mitchell said he found this letter among Carolyn Whitfield née Bradford's personal belongings after she died in 1910. It suggests that the situation is much more complicated than just a case of mental decline. It suggests that both Holloway brothers found something under their property that had a strong effect on them. Martha's mention of a full account hidden in her writing desk adds to the mystery. There was never any evidence of such a document, or if there was, it was hidden along with all the other records of the Holloway family. When Judge Woodson ordered the property to be burned, the writing desk may have been destroyed. When Mitchell's monograph came out, not many people paid attention to it. Scholars who reviewed his work said his methods were bad and his conclusions were too sensationalistic. The Historical Society in Springfield wouldn't sell the book. The publisher had sold off the unsold copies within a year. Mitchell himself, feeling let down, left academia to work as a journalist. But being unknown doesn't mean being forgotten. Copies of Mitchell's work are still in university libraries and private collections. In 1967, the discovery of a mass grave in a remote part of the Ozarks brought his research back into the spotlight. A forestry survey team found the grave by accident. It held the remains of at least 7 people. Forensic tests showed that they had died in the middle of the 1800s. These skeletons, like the deputy's remains found earlier, showed signs of strange treatment after death, such as scored bones and trepanned skulls. But there was more to it. The way the remains were arranged made it look like they were done on purpose. Dr. Victor Carrington, the anthropologist who looked at the site, wrote in his report, "The remains were arranged in a roughly circular pattern, with all skulls facing the center. A stone object, roughly cylindrical, about 8 inches tall and 4 inches wide, was placed at the center point. The object has markings that do not match any known Native American or European symbols. The stone cylinder was photographed and measured before being sent to the Smithsonian for more study. But before it could be looked at closely, the object vanished from the safe storage facility where it had been kept. An internal investigation found that it had been misplaced while being cataloged, but no one has ever been able to find out where it is now. It has never been possible to definitively determine who the people in the mass grave were. There were no dental records from that time, and DNA testing hadn't been invented yet. Some researchers have linked this find to the Holloway mystery because of the circumstances surrounding it, such as the location, the time period, and the strange way the remains were treated. Is it possible that these are the remains of the Holloway family and others who went through whatever horrible thing happened to them? The way the body was placed makes it look like it was part of a ritual, not just a quick way to get rid of murder victims. But what kind of ritual, and why? After the discovery, journalists got in touch with Mitchell, who came up with a theory that most people thought was crazy. He said that Jeremiah Holloway had found something in the caves below their property that was old and evil and had slowly taken over his mind. As Jeremiah's mental health got worse, he started to affect his family, and later others who came into contact with them, bringing them into a ritual meant to. At this point, Mitchell's theory gets fuzzy and talks about doorways and entities from elsewhere. Scholars dismissed Mitchell's supernatural theories in favor of more conventional explanations: a family rendered homicidal by isolation, a religious cult engaging in extreme rituals, or a localized outbreak of ergot poisoning from tainted grain, recognized for inducing hallucinations and psychosis. Nonetheless, the systematic endeavor to obliterate all traces of the Holloway family from public records remains inexplicable by conventional methods. Judge Woodson's extraordinary order indicates a level of institutional response that significantly surpasses the standard reaction to even the most egregious crimes of the era. Dr. Elizabeth Foster, a medical historian, published a study in 1965 about 19th century medical practices in rural America. This led to a more ordinary, but still disturbing theory. In a chapter about experimental treatments, she talked about doctors who did unethical experiments on patients because they were not being watched and were too eager to prove their scientific theories. The frontier was a perfect place for people whose medical interests went beyond what was considered moral, Foster wrote. Distance from medical authorities, along with the desperate need for any medical care in isolated communities, made it possible for experimental practices to thrive without any oversight. Foster gave several documented examples of doctors who did surgeries without permission, tested medications that weren't proven to work, or did questionable anatomical research. She didn't directly talk about the Holloway case, and she might not have even known about it, but her work gives us a way to think about what Jeremiah Holloway did. Is it possible that Jeremiah, who might have had training in medicine or science, was doing some kind of illegal research in the remote Ozarks? The surgical tools found in the cave system, the mentions of transformations and changes in his journal, and the proof of systematic post-mortem treatment of human remains all point to a pattern of methodical experimentation rather than random violence or supernatural influence. In 1968, an archivist at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School found a student record from 1841 to 1845 for Jeremiah Holloway of Richmond, Virginia. This gave the theory more support than expected. This record says that Holloway was a great student who was especially interested in comparative anatomy and the new field of evolutionary biology. His doctoral dissertation, titled On Physiological Adaptation and the Malleability of Human Form, posited the feasibility of inducing regulated anatomical modifications via environmental and chemical interventions. The dissertation itself has been lost, but a faculty evaluation survives in which Holloway's advisor, Dr. William Patterson, expressed concern about the extreme nature of his students' theoretical propositions and troubling indications that Mr. Send Holloway may have engaged in unsanctioned experimental work. Despite these concerns, Holloway was awarded his medical degree and appears to have established a practice in Richmond before relocating to Missouri with his brother's family. If Jeremiah Holloway was really doing some kind of radical medical research in the Ozarks, it could explain a lot of the mystery. Why the family chose such a remote location. Why they dug up the property. Why Isaiah was so upset when he saw what his brother was doing, and why the authorities took such extreme steps to erase all evidence after they found out what had really happened. But this theory doesn't explain everything in the story, especially the parts where Jeremiah talks about old ones who lived in these hills in his journal and the stone cylinder with unknown markings that was found in the middle of the mass grave. The last piece of the Holloway puzzle came together in 1969 when an old boarding house in Springfield was being turned into a hotel. In a sealed compartment under the floorboards of room 17, workers found a stash of personal items. One of these things was a leather portfolio with what looked like official papers with the Greene County seal on them. The papers included a full copy of Judge Woodson's order about the Holloway property, Sheriff Harding's full report on what the search party found, and most importantly, a personal account written by Judge Woodson himself, which was likely meant to explain why he did what he did. Woodson wrote, "What was found under the Holloway house is beyond rational explanation. The tunnel discovered in the cellar extended far deeper than any natural formation should allow. The search party reported descending for what seemed like hours, though in measured time it was perhaps 30 minutes. They discovered chambers that Sheriff Harding described as architecturally impossible. Rooms that appeared to shift and change as they were observed. Passages that led in circles despite maintaining a constant direction," Woodson continued. "In the deepest chamber, they discovered what appeared to be an altar of some kind. Upon it lay a book bound in material that no man present could identify. Harding reported that when Deputy Collins attempted to open the book, the chamber filled with a sound like thousands of voices whispering at once. Collins began to convulse. Weber, attempting to assist him, was likewise affected. The remaining men fled, half carrying Sheriff Harding, who had fallen into a state of catatonia from which he did not emerge for 3 days. When Harding regained his faculties, he ordered the tunnel sealed immediately. He then consulted with Judge Woodson, who issued his unprecedented order to expunge all records of the incident. I do not know what ancient evil the Holloways unearthed beneath their home," Woodson concluded. "I know only that it is beyond human comprehension, and that knowledge of its existence can only bring harm. I have ordered all records destroyed, not to hide the truth, but to protect humanity from it. May God forgive me if I am wrong." These papers, like many others related to the Holloway case, went missing soon after they were found. The renovation contractor who found them said that men who called themselves government historians took the papers and gave them a receipt that turned out to be fake. There is no record of these documents in any government archive. What should we think of Judge Woodson's story? It is hard to believe that there are architecturally impossible chambers and a book bound in unidentifiable material. It is possible that Woodson, similar to the Holloways, succumbed to a form of mass hallucination or shared psychosis, or he may have intentionally exaggerated his narrative to rationalize the drastic actions he undertook. However, one aspect of Woodson's account resonates unexpectedly with an apparently unrelated source. In 1932, Vance Randolph, a folklorist, published Ozark Magic and Folklore, which is a book of superstitions and folk beliefs from the area. One of the stories he recorded was told by an old woman from Taney County. She said that her grandfather was part of a hunting party in the 1860 seconds that found a door to the underworld in a remote valley. Randolph only wrote down the woman's name as Mrs. M. She said that her grandfather told her about going into a cave that went down and down, far deeper than any cave should go. Inside, they found rooms that changed their shape when you weren't looking directly at them, and heard thousands of voices whispering all at once. Randolph thought this story was just a colorful example of rural fantasy, maybe influenced by popular adventure books from the 1800s, He couldn't have known how much it looked like Judge Woodson's suppressed description of what was found under the Holloway property. Is it possible that both accounts are talking about the same thing? And if so, what kind of thing was that? A natural geological formation that superstitious people got wrong? The Holloways pulled off a complicated hoax for reasons that aren't clear, or something that really didn't make sense and went against what people thought? The answer might be in the geological history of the Ozarks. The area is famous for its many caves, which were made by water-eroding soluble limestone over millions of years. Some of these caves go hundreds of feet below the surface and have rooms that are huge. People who don't know how this works might think that sounds are being reflected and distorted in strange ways in these kinds of spaces. Also, some limestone formations have a lot of naturally occurring gases, like carbon dioxide and in some cases hydrogen sulfide. These gases can build up in small spaces to levels that can make people confused, make them see things, or even make them pass out or die. Is it possible that the Holloway property was built on top of such a formation, and that Jeremiah, who may have been curious about science, purposefully channeled these gases into their home as part of his experiments? This theory would explain a lot of the mystery, like how the family members acted differently, how they talked about voices and changes, and even how the authorities reacted so strongly. They might have known that releasing toxic gases was bad for public health, but it doesn't take into account other parts of the case, like the way the bodies were arranged in the mass grave, the stone cylinder with its unknown markings, and the way human remains were treated after death. These indicate intentional human actions, as opposed to natural occurrences or unintentional poisoning. The truth may be a mix of these ideas. Jeremiah Holloway, a trained doctor with strange ideas, finds a strange geological formation under the property that could be a natural source of gases that change people's minds. He starts to play around with these gases, maybe on himself and later on his family. They lead him to believe in old ones and transformations, which are false ideas. This delusion shows up in ritualistic behavior, like changing the bodies of dead people through surgery. When authorities learn the full extent of his actions, they see the threat to public health and the possibility of mass panic, which is why they take such extreme steps to get rid of all evidence. This explanation is possible, but it is still just a guess. The systematic destruction of records has been too successful, and too much time has passed for any clear conclusion. And maybe the most disturbing thing about the Holloway mystery is not what we know, but what is purposely kept from us. The officials went to great lengths to destroy all evidence, which suggests a fear that goes beyond just human violence. It shows a fear so deep that people who saw it thought the only way to be safe was to bury not only the physical evidence, but also the memory of it. The land where the Holloway property used to be has not been developed in the decades since these events. People who live nearby stay away from the area for no clear reason. Hikers sometimes say they have strange experiences, like feeling lost, losing track of time, or feeling like someone is watching them. Forest rangers don't want people to explore the more remote valleys because the ground is unstable and there are dangerous sinkholes. A geology graduate student from the University of Missouri tried to survey the cave systems in the area in 1968. He came back to his base camp after 2 days in the field very upset, packed up his gear, and left without saying why. The next week, he left the university. We couldn't get in touch with him for this research. What the student saw is still a mystery, but his field notes, which were found at the abandoned camp, have a strange entry from the 17th of June, 1968. Found unusual formation about 3 miles southwest of base camp. Narrow vertical shaft, looks man-made, or at least changed. Descended about 30 feet with ropes. Temperature drops significantly, at least 15 degrees below surface. Acoustic properties are extraordinary. Voice echoes return distorted, almost like whispers. Air quality is a concern. Feeling lightheaded. Will return tomorrow with gas detector and better equipment. There is no record of the student ever going back to the site. Because they were worried about his sudden departure, university officials sent a search team to the coordinates he wrote down in his field book. They said they couldn't find any proof of the shaft he talked about, but they did notice that the area had recently moved, which could have been a small landslide that hid the entrance. The Holloway story is linked to another strange event in Ozark history, the Mad Trapper of Taney County. In the winter of 1891-1892, a number of strange things happened in a remote area about 40 miles south of the old Holloway property. Hunters and trappers said that the animals they caught were strangely damaged. A number of men went missing and were not found for weeks, when they were found wandering around in a confused state, unable to explain where they had been or what had happened to them. Local officials said that a hermit named Old Webster, who had lived alone in the hills for decades, was to blame for these events. According to reports from the time, a sheriff's posse eventually trapped Webster in a cave. Instead of giving up, he went deeper into the cave system. The posse didn't want to go with him into the dark, so they blew up the entrance. It is not clear how this event is related to the Holloway case, if at all. But there is a hint in Sheriff Elias Barton's personal papers that leads us to believe something. In a letter to his brother dated February 1892, Barton wrote, "The business with Webster is over, but in a way that makes me very uneasy. Before we sealed the cave, I saw markings on the walls near the entrance that I have only seen once before, on some papers related to the Holloway incident of '60. I would have looked into it more if I could have, but the men were eager to be done with the business and get away from that cursed place. I can't help but wonder if there is some connection between these two events, which happened 30 years apart but have the same strange mark." This reference implies that the symbol discovered on the stone cylinder in the mass grave, and likely in the chambers beneath the Holloway property, had re-emerged in relation to another unsettling event. If we take Sheriff Barton's comment at face value, it means that there was a tradition or influence that lasted for decades. The most recent chapter in the Holloway mystery happened in 1965, when Daniel Crawford, a researcher, started looking into old land records in Greene County. Crawford, who was getting his Ph.D. in American history at Columbia University, was first interested in how people owned and used land after the Civil War. He was interested in the strange legal status of a certain piece of land, the old Holloway property, which had been owned by the county since 1861 and could not be developed or lived on. Crawford was curious about this strange thing and started looking for information about the property's previous owners. He quickly came across the methodical destruction of records that had done such a good job of hiding the Holloway story. He didn't give up, though, and added personal papers, oral histories, and unofficial sources to his research. Crawford put together most of the story told here over the course of 2 years. His research notes, which are kept in the special collections of Columbia University Library, show that he had a methodical mind that was trying to make sense of incomplete evidence and conflicting accounts. But they also show something else, an obsession with the case that is growing, and in the later entries, signs of paranoia that is growing. In his last entry, dated the 3rd of November 1967, Crawford wrote, "I am being followed. I have felt their presence for weeks now, but today I saw one of them clearly, a man in a dark suit, standing outside my apartment building. They know what I've discovered. They know I've seen the connections." The same pattern has repeated across decades, in 1892, in 1924, in 1953, always in the Ozarks, always with the same signature. I've compiled all my evidence in a separate document, which I've sent to Professor Harrington for safekeeping. If anything happens to me, that document will ensure the truth cannot be buried again. Crawford's apartment in New York City was empty 3 days after he wrote this. His research materials were in a mess, which could mean he left in a hurry or that someone else was looking for them. No one has ever found the separate document that he talked about in his last entry. When the police asked Professor Harrington about it, he said he had not received any packages or materials from Crawford. The official investigation found that Crawford had a mental breakdown, which may have been caused by working too hard and being alone. They thought he might have killed himself when he went missing, but they never found his body. But his family has never accepted this explanation, pointing out that he was mentally healthy before he started the Holloway research and that the circumstances of his disappearance were strange. Some researchers have looked into other unsolved cases from the Ozark region during those times because Crawford mentioned that similar patterns happened again in 1924 and 1953. The small mining town of Orchard Creek, which was about 20 miles east of the old Holloway property, was abandoned in just 1 week in 1924. Reports in the nearby Springfield newspaper talk about a disagreement over mining rights and worries about the stability of the structure, but they don't go into much detail. As in the Holloway case, county records show that a court ordered the Orchard Creek property to be condemned and put under indefinite development restrictions. There was no systematic erasure of records in this case, though. This could be because the memory of the earlier incident had faded by 1924, or because different officials were involved. A research team from the University of Arkansas went on a 2-week trip to a remote part of the Ozarks in 1953 to study plants. They never came back. Search parties found their camp still standing, but empty. It looked like the team had just walked away because their equipment, samples, and personal belongings were still there. There has never been any sign of the 6 researchers. Local authorities once again declared the area off-limits, but this time it was for environmental reasons. Crawford thought that these events were linked to the Holloway case. Are they? There may be connections between the two because they are close together and the official responses are similar. But we can't be sure because we can't look at sealed records or do more archaeological work on the lands in question because they are restricted. The stone cylinder that was found in the middle of the mass grave and then went missing from the Smithsonian storage facility may be the most interesting clue to the mystery. There is an interesting footnote in the form of a maintenance report from 1968. A night watchman said he heard strange noises coming from the locked storage area, like thousands of voices whispering at once. When investigators got there the next morning, they found the watchman in a catatonic state, holding a sketch pad on which he had drawn the same symbol over and over again. The symbol didn't look like any known language or iconography, but people who saw it before the sketch pad also disappeared said it looked a lot like the markings on the missing stone cylinder. Dr. Elizabeth Morrow, a comparative linguist, wrote an article for the Journal of Historical Linguistics in 1967 called Comparative Analysis of Undeciphered Symbolic Systems in North America. One of the examples she looked at was a rubbing of the markings from Minders's Nuver Qual, the stone cylinder that a co-worker at the Smithsonian gave her before the object went missing. Morrow noted that these markings had some structural similarities to some ancient petroglyphs found in caves in the Ozark region, but she also saw some big differences. The fundamental geometric components seemed to be connected to native symbolic traditions, but the organizational syntax, the way these components are arranged in relation to one another, looks a lot like some mathematical notations that were created in 17th century Europe, especially those related to early calculus and geometric analysis. Morrow suggested that the markings were not just an indigenous tradition or a European import, but a deliberate effort to make a new symbolic system that connected the two. This strange mix of old images and modern math structure led him to this conclusion. She said that to do this, you would need to know a lot about Native American cultures and have a good understanding of math. This was an unusual combination in mid-19th century America, but a medical doctor with unusual interests might have had it. Is it possible that Jeremiah Holloway made this system of symbols himself? And if so, why? Morrow's analysis offers a potential explanation. The recursive patterns and nested structures present in these markings align with efforts to depict intricate multidimensional relationships. In contemporary mathematical terminology, this could be characterized as an endeavor to delineate transformations among various states or conditions,